everybody? Amen. A couple of months ago, exactly in the month of March, on the 20th through the 25th, it was the 248th anniversary of something that happened very historic in America. It was called the Second Virginia Convention, and it was held in Williamsburg, Virginia. I know it wasn't you. It was held in Richmond, Virginia. That convention started a prelude to the Revolutionary War that we know about. Now, I got a couple of notes here. I'm sorry, I can't remember things. But due to the injustices that the colonies were receiving from King George in England, it was despicable. It was not right. It was unjust. It was unfair. It was pointed towards England, British interest, and not the colonists. And believe you me, the colonists were making plenty of money for England. And they needed it because they were fighting war with the French. So, I'm not going to go any further into that, but just to tell you that this convention, the Second Virginia Convention, is where Patrick Henry said his famous speech, "Give me liberty or give me death." And I'm going to say that tonight. But all because they weren't allowed to meet in their capital in Williamsburg, Virginia, which Brother Clayton is going to tell us about. Brother Clayton is going to be portraying the character of Peyton Randolph. Peyton Randolph was the presiding officer of the Second Virginia Convention. Robbie Stokes is going to be playing the part of George Reed, and I'll let him tell you about why and how he's doing that. And Barry Collins, myself, I'm going to be playing the part. I'm blessed to do this, lucky to do this. Patrick Henry. We've done it many times, so we hope you enjoy it. We're going to get as close to reenactment as we can. But first, let me tell you a little bit about that little church they were in, because they were having it in Richmond, Virginia. They weren't allowed to meet at the House of Burgess in Williamsburg, Virginia anymore. So they hid away. It was kind of a secret meeting. We started out with 90 delegates packed into a little church called St. John's Church. It's up there today. It's on Wall Street in Richmond, Virginia. If you ever get up there that way, go by and see it. It is neat. They put on this full demonstration, this full, what do we call it? Presentation thing. 3 or 4 times a year. So it's pretty realistic. That first church in its original size was 53 feet long and 36 feet wide. And it was packed with 90 people on the first day. Now, it grew a little bit, the crowd that is, and towards the end of the week it grew to 105 delegates. Now, I did a little math in my head there, and that works out to about 1 square foot a person. Now, how can you put all of those people in that little bitty church and have a meeting concerning the future of the United States of America? They did it somehow. And tonight, we just want to relive that with you. Now, last thing, and I'll shut up, because I like to do this. Here's some of the reasons why they met at that St. John's Church and had the Second Virginia Convention, because that means there was the first in Williamsburg. But Britain, since 1765, not 1775, they were quartering troops illegally in the house and homes of the American colonists. They were quartering, it was called the Quartering Troops Act. How would you like for a soldier to come and move into your house and take your little girl's beds and sleep there every night? What? They were doing that? Yeah. And they had a stamp act that everything written or stamps or a piece of paper or printed, anything had a tax on it. Well, some of these businesses go out of business. They had a Boston Massacre. We've read about that, haven't we? The Boston Massacre happened in 1770 of April. The Tea Act, tax on tea. That was in 1773. The Boston Tea Party happened shortly thereafter in 1773 of December, where they unloaded all of the tea into Boston Harbor. And we weren't going to pay the English their unbelievably expensive Christ and Catholic. What's the word? Catholic. Yes. Acts. Yeah, but it's the number 8. And finally, they have the Boston Port Act in March of 1774. Everything that came in, everything that went out was taxed. Now, a lot of these things that went on were just too much of a burden on the colonies. But remember that the colonies were English subjects of England. King George III at the time was on the throne, and he was in charge. And all of Americans at that time were thought to be patriots to the king. But there's only so much you can take when injustice prevails. And it reminds me of some things that are going on today. Injustice, I should say, is prevailing more often than justice is. So think back on these times when America was just the early colony, not yet the United States, not yet the Declaration of Independence, but getting ready to fight a war. All yours, sir.
Oh boy, I'm excited now. I'd like to share some facts with you. It's very apropos that we're doing this in a church today. How many people have ever heard of the Black Robe Society? We got a couple of here. Well, the Black Robe Society was a term that was given to colonist preachers by England. Why is that? My colleague just told you they were not allowed to meet together. They weren't allowed to have town meetings, so everybody found out what was going on in the church. There was a guy that was given credit for this named Peter Mullenberger. Peter Mullenberger was a pastor, and he gave a sermon on Ecclesiastes, which said there's a time for all seasons. And when he got to the part where it said it was a time for war, he pulled off his robe and had a uniform on under it, and he said, now it's time for war, and walked out and took many of his parishioners out to go fight the battle. So the churches were very involved in the politics back then on what was going on, and if it hadn't been for the churches, we'd have never had an American Revolution. The other thing I want you to understand is how close it was. There were decisions in the same house on whether to stay loyal to the king or whether to go with the colonists. It was so close, in fact, that Benjamin Franklin was on one side, his son was on the other. His son was a loyalist and took over as governor and put out a warrant for his daddy's arrest, wanting dead or alive. After the war was over, Benjamin Franklin's son never spoke again. Now, I'd like to talk about George Reed, the person I am impersonating. He wasn't really at the second convention. But, as usual, the victor gets to write what history is. So there's very little out there on the other side from Patrick Henry, except for this guy, George Reed. George Reed was one person who voted against fighting the American Revolution and gave his reasons, and they're recording history today. But once the vote was taken and they decided to go to war, he helped write the Declaration of Independence, which shows that he was trying to do what he thought was best for America. So the vote in the second convention was separated by one vote. When the delegates finally got together for the final vote, there was only one vote difference, and we decided to go to war. So we established a small debate to show why Patrick Henry thought we could win this war, and why George Reed said we can't. And we'd like to share some of that with you in just a moment. You got anything about that?
No.
Bear in mind that in 1775, in that beautiful spring, there were no cell phones, there were no recording devices. There was no easy way to transcribe what went on at that convention. What you are about to hear, as best history has brought it forward hundreds of years, is what we believe to have happened. America, land of the free, home of the brave. But it has not always been so. Our founding fathers had no idea at the time that the dream of freedom would go so far. Many of the colonists embraced severing ties with England, but also many of the loyalists feared the consequences of what would come from that. It was a time of heated discourse and debate, dividing allegiances to the British Crown and the American colonies, and at times, even family members turning against each other. No longer allowed to assemble at the House of Burgess in Williamsburg and to avoid interference from Lieutenant Governor Dunmore and his Royal Marines, the Second Virginia Convention met that beautiful spring, March 20th, 1775, in England, at Richmond, in what is now called St. John's Church. Delegate Patrick Henry presented resolutions to raise the militia and to put Virginia in a posture of defense. His opponents urged caution and patience until the Crown replied to Congress's latest petition for reconciliation. On the 23rd, Henry presented a proposal to organize a volunteer company, cavalry, or infantry in every Virginia county. By custom, Henry addressed himself to the convention's president, Hayden Randolph, Williamsburg. Now, his words, as I mentioned earlier, were not transcribed, but no one who heard them ever forgot their eloquence. Or Henry's closing words, "Give me liberty, or give me death." They were to mark a prelude to America winning its freedom and independence from England. There were many individuals whose contributions, as well as opposition, led America toward winning its independence. But Patrick Henry's words that day so stirred the country that they still echo in the hearts of Americans to this very day. What might we have seen? What might we have heard had we been in attendance during those proceedings? Perhaps words similar to the following dramatization. And if we listen closely, we might hear them today. This convention is in order. The chair at this time recognizes Mr. George Reed.
Mr. President, fellow delegates, can you not hear the nails being driven into the gallows even as we speak? We shall all be hung as traitors. Have we so soon forgotten that our glorious King founded these lands, not us, has given it to us out of his goodness, provided for us in times of cold, heat, famine. Not too long ago, he assisted us with our French Indian wars. This king has given us everything that we own now, and we turn our backs on him. As Christians, do we not believe in loyalty? Do we not believe in standing together and supporting the one who's helped us with so long? He protects us now against the Spanish and the French. Our King has provided for us many things, and yet we stand here today and speak of war. War, not petitions, not negotiations. Our own Benjamin Franklin has carried our petitions to the foot of the throne, and there is yet hope. Hope for success, that our demonstrances shall be listened to, heard, and then we can once again feel comfortable as a free people. Yes, I say free. We worry about the British being in the quarters. They're not hurting us with our business dealings overseas. We still have things coming into our country from other places. We still negotiate. We still move freely. But yet we talk about war. All over a tax on tea. Tea! Do you risk your sons and daughters over a small pound of a tax on tea? Why would you risk the lives of those that you love? We have no armies. We have no navies. We have no war chest with which to buy supplies to fight the greatest military might in the world. Yet you speak of war. What should happen should you lose this battle? Where would you be then now? Would you be a slave to the king? Obviously, if you can't be trusted, you're no longer loyal. What do you think will happen if we lose the war? Not to mention all of the men, women, and children that will die and suffer because of this battle. Over a tax on tea. We must use our heads and realize we have no army to fight the British. Where will this come from? Mr. President, I vote that we follow the king. Wait for peace and harmony. Wait to hear from our own Benjamin Franklin. We should always strive peace. Peace is how we will survive as a people. I say, stay loyal to the king and wait for him to redress our grievances. Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow delegates.
Brave words. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Reed. Order! The chair now recognizes Patrick Henry.
No man thinks more highly than I do of patriotism, as well as the abilities of these worthy gentlemen who have just addressed this house. But often different men see the same subject in different lights. Therefore, I hope it will not be thought disrespectful should I, entertaining as I do, opinions which are very opposite to theirs. I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve, for this is no time for ceremony. The question before this house is one an awful moment for our young fledgling country, and should I hold back my opinions for fear of giving offense, I should consider myself guilty of treason to my country and disloyal to the majesty of heaven, whom I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, fellow delegates, it is natural for man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into peace. Is this the part of wise men, engaged in such a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be among the number of those who having eyes see not, or having ears hear not, those things which so nearly concern the temporal salvation? I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no other way of judging the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what has there been in the conduct of the British Chancery for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which these gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves in this house. Is it that insinuous smile with which our petition has been so lately received? Christ, it not says, it shall prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed by a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our lands. Let us not deceive ourselves, sirs. These are implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for these accumulations of navies and armies? Nay, such he has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded. And we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve and violate those inestimable privileges for which we have so long been contending, we must fight. I repeat it, sirs, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God house is all that is left us. They tell us, sirs, that we are weak, and able to cope with so formidable an adversary. Sir, we are not weak if we make proper use of the means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. Besides, sirs, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations and will raise strength to fight our battles for us. There is no retreat, but in submission and slavery, our chains are forced. They're dragging me behind the plains of Boston. The war's actually begun. The next gale which sweeps from the north shall bring to our ears a clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give ye liberty or give ye death.
Convention stands in recess.
I'd like to share a little bit more with you about that. We did this skit, this performance at a first grade level. And I was wondering, what in the world is first graders going to get out of this? So I said, does anybody have any questions? This little girl in the front row looked at me and she said, yeah, why do you keep weeping at me? Because I've got an eye that closes up on it automatically by itself. In that situation with kids nowadays, I went, I'm not weaker than nobody. Teachers, you understand that, right? I have a medical condition. Have you got any other question for me? She said, yeah, where do you get all the guns from? This is from a first grader. And I said, well, you know, that's how they ate. They went out and shot their food with their guns. They had them in almost every household. And then they did get some guns from buying them from the French. And she goes, great. I said, is anybody else? So the boy said, where are you getting money to buy them guns? Well, guess what? Just so happens, we looked that up. There was a guy named Solomon who furnished most of the money for that war and helped us to be able to succeed. And he helped us buy the guns and ammunition. And then there were people like my ancestor. I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution. And my ancestor was a shopkeeper. And the stuff that he was brought in shipments, he would give part of it to the British Army because he had to, and the rest of it he was sneaking out underground and giving it to the colonists. That doesn't mean the gunpowder wasn't wet when he gave it to the British, but neither here, that's another story. But anyway, but that was where they got their guns and arms to fight. It was not a big deal where somebody came in and said, hey, here's your war chest, here's all the money you want, here's all the arms. No, these guys took what little bit of supplies they had, what little bit of armament they had, and they went out, and what they did was every time they won a battle, they would take the parts that was left over, the cannons, the guns, the flint, the powder, and they would take it as their own, and they would go back. The difference between the two was the fact that the British thought that firepower was the answer. The British would get up there in several lines, several rows, and the front row would kneel down, and they would shoot. Wow! Everybody on that front row. And then they would stay down, and the next ones would go in front of them, and then they would start loading. And then the third one would come back, and they would be finished. So they just kept firing over and over and over. The only thing is, they didn't know what they were shooting at. Because the colonists didn't do that. The colonists stayed in the trees. They'd already fought the French and the Indians, and they'd already learned about battle. So they were in the trees watching these idiots stand out in the middle of the circle, shooting at them. They'd go, hey, just shoot at anything red. And we beat them battle after battle and pushed them back. They were winning the war on supplies, but they weren't winning the war on deaths. And I'll give you some numbers for that later on. But it was the dedication and the commitment of the men and women during that particular time that made the battle victorious. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the guns. It was the dedication of people who were fighting for their homes, for their family, for their wives, for their children. That's what the battle was about. That's what the argument was. It wasn't the taxes. The colonists didn't have money. They had to trade their goods for that. But by taking the goods and giving them too much for the King of England to go fight with France, we're going to give them half of what we got so that he can go fight that, and you're taking food out of my family's mouth. These people were fighting the war for their family. They weren't fighting for anything else. Nothing except their own survival. And because they had that kind of heart, that kind of dedication, they defeated the greatest army of the world.
Okay, we're getting ready to entertain you with some patriotic music, but a final word. 10 days after the Second Virginia Convention was Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. What did he say? The British are coming. They sure did. And then the next day, within the next 24 hours, was the battle, two battles. Actually, they call it one, the Battle of Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. And that's when the first battles occurred in the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War ran from 1775 to 1783. Is that 7 years? 7 years. 6 years. 7 years. I can't add. We're going to learn that in school, how to add, okay? And you can help me on mine. So, what a wonderful time to do this for you, because tomorrow's Memorial Day. And we want to honor and memorialize and always remember people that have gone to war for us us and stood up for us and fought for us and kept America great. What did Jesus say? What was his words about death, about standing up for someone? He said, it is that's right. No love is greater than he who lays down his life for another. So those 1,142,500 deaths that have occurred from the Revolutionary War, which they didn't have records of, until today, that's how many military people, men and women, have given their lives for the freedom of this country. So we need to be thankful for that and not forget that. Great time to be here tonight. Thank you for having us now. We're going to sing, but we're going to get comfortable because it's very, very hot in these clothes. So may I have your permission to take off my coat?
I also want to say to these young ladies, they're a little bit too young to know what we're talking about. But we all know about Paul Revere and his ride. Well, I just learned and did some research here lately that there was a young girl that made that ride that was longer than Paul Revere's ride. And she actually contacted more people. And she was just a young girl. So somebody brought her up right and let her realize the importance that she could play in the American Revolution. You may be those patriots one day. Thank you.
Readers, Robbie.
Junior, I'm gonna borrow them. Everybody know Junior? Junior's my buddy since before most of y'all were born. I've got about 10 pairs, but 9 of them are home.
He also didn't have the 1700s.
The Lord just never did have it.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, and the waves of rain, for pearl mountains, majesty above the fluted plain. When in the course of human events, it's become necessary for courageous men and women to step forward and protect this land of milk and honey and its nation of God-fearing people, to protect our liberty, our freedom, and maintain justice. Many answered the call, and in June 1775, Congress officially recognized the United States Army. Over in the day, in
did Congress establish the United States Air Force. Congress recognized the official Ghost Star.
Go back with it. I'm sorry to stand for you. You see, we don't make mistakes like this when we go over there in the hall on Friday nights. We don't ever make mistakes. When we're in here, we're excited, we're nervous because it's such a big crowd and a big, beautiful church. So forgive us for our mistakes tonight. We'll make it better. Just come to the seniors dinner when they have in July.
Yeah. there were already talks about World War II. They were overseas, and America was worried about us getting drug into this. We tried to stay out of World War I unsuccessful. And World War II was imminent. And the United States thought that they were going to be pulled in. Then a person named Kate Smith decided she was going to introduce a new song. Something that would put things in perspective about what's going on overseas and what we need to do as Americans. So she introduced a song called God Bless America. But did you know that that was originally written as a prayer? Not just a song, but it was a prayer asking God to bless America in these troubling times. And the same goes for today. While the storm clouds gather,
You see all the
read about or see today about what's wrong with America. Some people spewing hate, violence, and no respect for our flag. Can't understand why some no longer love this great country. But let me say this, dear God, she's like a mother to me. All I am, or ever hope to be, I owe to you and to her.
Amen.
God bless America again. You see all the trouble that she's in. Wash her pretty face and dry her eyes, and then God bless America again. Wash her pretty face and dry her eyes, and then God bless America again.
This morning at my church, this Pam Kish, a lot of y'all know her, she sang this song. It's called I Am an American Christian. I tell you what, it should be one of our theme songs in America to tell that crazy left, and forgive me, Lord, for doing politics in your house. But I'll tell you what, Jesus said, I am the truth, I am the life, I am the resurrection. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. And we need to preach that because he told us to do it. He said, till I come back. You're going to see me coming back in the east. Split those clouds again, and I'm coming back just the way I left. But while I'm gone, do what? Preach my word. Speak my truth. Talk to the people that are lost about Jesus' salvation. That's what our job is, and we need to do that. And we need to keep faith no matter how bad it looks, and how bad it's getting, and how prognosticators tell us that, boy, we're, blah, 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 blah. Just keep your eyes on Jesus and pray to him, and he will take care of his people. He always has, and always will. And one day, which way's east? Is that way over there, City? Is that east? I'm turning, it's over here. One day, he's coming in the clouds. Ain't that going to be a glorious day? Yes, sure is. Now, Ronnie, I said all I'm going to say. Your turn.
Awesome. He says you can't bring politics to church, and I say you do it every Sunday. Every Sunday when that preacher gets up and preaches out of the Bible, that's politics. Because the country right now doesn't know where they're going. They're lost. It's a lost world out there. And it's up to the preachers to get to the people like they did during the American Revolution. To get people excited, to go back into the world and say, the Bible says this, and when we were doing this, we were a great and mighty country. Right now we're being spit on by almost everyone because we're not following the godly principles. You cannot choose somebody to elect as president. You can't say that. But you can say, our president needs to believe in the Bible, and he needs to do this. Every Sunday, your preacher needs to be that politician that says America needs to turn back to God. Because I am an American Christian. In God I will trust. United I'll stand with my brothers and sisters all over this land. Will I love the Lord? I love the U.S. of A. In the land of the free, see liberty, I'm not a But surely the church is where we're going to turn things around in this country. It's not the politicians. They're all on the same side, the side of the money is. We're on the side where love is. Jesus Christ is love. And we support him, we support his causes, and we need to take it into the world, even to the vote. Y'all be sure to vote for you. Thank you.
Thank y'all for having us. And I look around your beautiful church. I see these banners on the wall. There's our glorious flag. Ain't nothing more beautiful than our flag. All think about all the military that carried that and fought for that in times past and times present. And then that wonderful banner up there, God bless America and those who serve. How patriotic is that? God bless you, Gardenview Baptist Church. And then the Lord, we lift up your name on high. Amen. Oh, come let us adore him. Amen. It is finished. The cross finished it all. We got all of that in one nation under God. I love those banners. And I get excited. I'm sorry. Thank y'all for having us here tonight. Keep on keeping on. Don't let the devil win. Because Jesus is the victor. He's already paid the price. He's already won the war. All we got to do is stay with him, pray to him, love him, accept him, do his will, do his work. When he speaks through you to do a kind deed to somebody else, or to go past that on the back, go do it. Go do it. Thank y'all for having us.
Well, I want you to know that Veterans Day is in November. To people that are in uniform today, is there anybody here? Because I was going to ask you, what's your day? Armistice Day, June 14th. Today is not the day to recognize those people. They each have their own day. When you go home today, remember the ones who gave the ultimate sacrifice, whose check was cashed. They died so that we could have our American flag up there in the front. Not the British, not the German, not the French, not the Italian, not the Russians, but an American flag. They died so that we could keep that in our freedoms. And the first place in the Constitution, freedom of religion. We would lose all that if it hadn't been for the people that were willing to step up to the plate and give their lives for this country. Those are the people we want to recognize today. So I thank each one of y'all for coming out to recognize that. The word Happy Memorial Day, don't get it. Celebrate today is not it. But we need to have a solemn day of remembrance for those who gave up. Thank you.
And Robbie, you brought them all a gift. Tell them about the gift that you brought for them.
What a gift.
In the box, on the front row in that big
The
box.
American Revolution was fought over rights. I have brought for everybody who wants to take one home the Bill of Rights that was put onto the Constitution, which includes your rights today. If you are confused, you need to know, pass them out. You want to give them to the school, take all you want. If you run out, I will bring you more. We are a member of an organization that passes out the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to schools all over the United States. If you have a school that needs one, you let me know and I'll get it. You want to give it to your church, you let me know. So let's get the word out. Thank you.